Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to this Unbreakable Self-Training session. I'm your host, Dr. Dave. In this Unbreakable Self-Training session, we're going to dive into exactly how to hold space from the emotion of life and what the common pitfalls are and how not to fall into those pitfalls. All right, let's dive into exactly what this looks like. If you haven't already watched some of the other videos, we're in step number 4 here of the Unbreakable Mind model, and in how to use it, how to become more functional, how to get better results in our life. Go back to each one of these first. It's a bit of a story, because this is important for you to understand each one of these components. Because if you're not doing every single one of these components, and all the gurus out there are kind of like diving into each one of these things, but nobody's really putting it all together, and that's what I wanted to do for you today. Is from my understanding of all the things, is that once you understand each one of these, then you can dive ultimately into each one and then get better results in your life. Okay, so let's talk about this lesson specifically. We're diving into the emotion of the components of this mental model, this mind model. And again, emotion, and I've studied this in other lessons, the emotion is the fundamental basis upon which we exist. If you ever think about, like, do you ever watch a movie without the sound, and you're seeing like a lot of chaos? Maybe it's like the movie Die Hard as an example. Just doesn't matter what the movie is, but something that's like action packed, and there's no music behind it, and there's like, you just have it on mute, and you don't even have like subtitles on. You're just like watching. You're like, this is really weird and lame. I mean, like, I'm not experiencing this the same way as otherwise would. Now, here's the interesting thing. We experience life through the emotional state. This is really important. We experience life through the emotional state. And if we can now identify and command emotion, all of a sudden our life gets a heck of a lot better. We oftentimes, here's the pitfalls, and I mentioned this in the beginning, the pitfalls is oftentimes we think that if we can change the situation, then we're going to feel better about it. Or if we can change the result, then we're going to feel better about it. Or if we can change our action, we can feel better about it. But what we're not doing is we're actually not going into the thinking component. That's what this is over here. We think that from that, right, our pitfall, we think that we're going to feel better if we just take better action. I'm just going to be more productive. So we're looking for productivity hacks. I used to do that. I used to be like, productivity hacks. I used to do time hacking. I used to do this stuff. Oh, I can get more shit done, get more done. I'm going to hustle. But you feel worthless still. So you're hustling for your worthiness. And so no matter what, you're still going to get the same lackluster result. You're going to still get the same situation. And all of a sudden, you're going to keep going in that cycle, keep telling yourself a certain thing. You're going to put meaning to that. Then you're going to get the same emotion. And you're like, oh, man. What do I got to do? What do I got to do to change this? And again, this is the what component. We're going to talk about the what, but we're going to actually talk about the how, and we're going to get into some actual practices in the Unbreakable Academy and Tribe. So if you're not part of the Academy, dive into the description below and dive into to get into the actual practices. We're just going to talk about the framework and the what here. But if you want that information, again, go to the Academy, dive into that right now. So here's the what of the emotion. Again, emotion is the way in which we live. This is the dichotomy of life. This is the heaven and the hell. This is the up and the down. This is the left and the right. We have to have good and bad. Bad emotion does not mean that it's bad. And I'm saying that poor emotion, we'll call it that. So poor emotion like despair and hurt and anger and pain and rage, all those things, that's not bad. It's just the way in which we experience the world. We have to have poor emotion in order for us to have positive emotion. It's just the natural dichotomy of our reality. Now, that's super important. Oftentimes when we're in a situation, like let's say, and I've been giving this situation in some of the other videos, like let's say you're broke, right? And you tell yourself a statement about that, and there's some meaning behind it. Well, the emotion to that is going to be shit. Despair, helplessness, hopelessness, maybe rage, anger, and then you rise your way up. Now, here's the interesting thing is emotion on the negative scale of things, at the very, very bottom, there's despair, there's helplessness, there's hopelessness, right? Underneath that is it's suicidal. In fact, that could be suicidal. I've been in that state of helpless and hopeless and despair, thinking that I'm isolated, thinking that no one is there to help me, thinking that I don't know what to do. Now, above that is anger. Now, you're probably thinking anger is still kind of negative thing. It is at the end of the day, but anger is better than feeling helpless. So here's the interesting thing. As you are identifying your emotions, you're becoming more aware of them, and we'll get into the actual practices here. Anger is better than helpless and hopeless. Oftentimes people feel helpless and hopeless, and anger is a better feeling. Now here's the interesting thing about that. People who are angry, other people don't feel safe around that. So if you start to get angry, and then all of a sudden you start to feel ashamed about your own anger, you're going to go right back to helpless and hopeless because you don't want to harm somebody that you might love. As an example, I didn't want to harm my wife like verbally or physically, and I never did, but I would rage, I would get angry because I was coming out of helplessness, and I would get angry and she would tell me to calm down. Well, what's calm down from anger? Going back to helplessness. But when you come out of helplessness and you start to rage, you start to get angry, that's a good thing. So just know that. Now, to understand that, you have to also know that anger has to be focused in a positive direction. So where to get angry is going to be either by yourself, at a boxing gym, or in a weight room. Those are the easiest ways to get angry. In fact, you just rage it out, or by yourself in your bedroom and just rage, just scream, just cuss, just get pissed. And then after you're angry, then you can go into the next step, which is jealousy. And I know it sounds like that's weird. Now the next step is jealousy, and then you process that, and then it's revenge, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be revengeful, but it's better than jealousy. So then you get into revenge, then you go into pessimism, then you go into pride, right? So that's the negative side of things. Now pride, that's super important. Pride's at the top of the negative, and that's by design, right? We've already heard of the term kill your ego, or ego is the enemy. It's because pride will keep you in the negative, will keep you in that negative feeling, that painful emotional state, right? Again, these are emotional states. These are just the spectrum of emotional states, okay? So pride is the top of that, and then on the positive side, we'll get to that here in a second. But it's super important to just completely be aware of your emotional state, and I'm going to give you a practice on how you can do that, and then how you can go to the next level. Again, in the actual academy, we'll dive into practices of how to utilize each one of those emotions, how to move through them safely, effectively, how to process them, how to dive into them, etc. Okay? But just know that as we get to the top of the negative side of the emotional scale, we know that pride is on the top and helplessness and hopelessness is on the bottom. Now here's the interesting thing, and nobody taught me this, so I had to figure this out the hard way. So you're going to rise up, right, as things get better, okay? And by the way, negative feeling emotions, the new science coming out, feels the same as negative pain, right? As pain, physical pain. So emotional pain feels the same as physical pain. So that's important to note. We perceive it in our body the same way. So as we're rising up on the emotional scale, we get to that top. That top is pride. When we get to pride, what is pride? Pride is our ego telling us we can do it. I can do it myself. I can do it. Right? That is what pride is. But I'm slowing down so you really get this, because nobody told me this. If you want to progress, if you want to be the best version of yourself, if you want to be happy, if you want to be healthy, if you want to have better results, if you want to have better everything, your life, you want to have more money, you want to have more health, you cannot stop at pride. You cannot stop at pride. You get to pride, if you stop there and you think, I can do it myself, I'll figure it out, what will happen is, boom, you'll go right back to helpless. You'll just drop right back down, you'll start climbing out. Pride will get in the way, boom, you'll go right back down. Now I'm going slow here so you understand this, because nobody told me this. And so when you get to pride, what is the next step? This is super important. The the first step on the positive side of the emotional scale is courage. What does that mean? So if you want to go, and if I continue on my scale here, if I'm from pride and I want to get to courage, there's a bridge. There's a bridge between pride and courage, and that bridge is vulnerability. What is vulnerability? That bridge is vulnerability, especially for men. This comes very difficult, especially for military men, as I was. I was a veteran, combat veteran, been to war. I can figure it out. I got this, right? That's what we tell ourselves. But what am I doing? I'm stopping at pride. Now I was getting the same lackluster result, and I was dropping right back down to helplessness. Now, of course, I was still mission-driven, so I knew what my mission was. I knew I had to be there for my family, but I wasn't getting the results to be there for my family, and I would get the pride and be like, no. So keep climbing. I would get the pride. What did I have to do? I had to cross the bridge of vulnerability. What is vulnerability? It's shedding your skin, shedding that exoskeleton, shedding that pride, and asking for help and receiving help and telling yourself, I'm broken. I'm broken. You have to get there. You have to get to that space. You have to call a spade a spade. You got to get to that space. Period. There is no other way around it. You have to be there. Now again, I'm reaching into your camera right now, your computer screen, and I'm pulling you close, and I'm helping you understand this. This is the most important piece. If you want to be unbreakable, you have to admit you're broken. Period. That I'm a broken man, I'm a broken woman. That's what you have to admit to. And the only way you can go to the next level of the positive side of emotion, because you'll feel positive every once in a while, but you'll go right back down. But the only way you can live there is admit. When they say kill your ego or kill your ego is the enemy, it just is saying that pride is the thing that stops you. Get your pride away. That's what being humble is. That's what humility is. That's what calling people and saying, I need help. It's being vulnerable, to go to courage. Now, of course, that could also be believing that there is something out there for you, that there is a higher power, a higher purpose. That is what courage is. So true courage is being vulnerable. True courage is being vulnerable. You'll be more attractive as a man or a woman. You'll be more likely to find the results you want. You'll be more likely to feel better if you can just be vulnerable, no matter what that situation is. Again, I don't care what the situation is. You have to be able to be vulnerable, okay? So vulnerability is having courage to believe that there might be a higher power, a higher purpose. If you have to go into a church, I don't care what that thing is. That is what courage is. That's what faith is. It's stepping across. So that's the whole story of light and dark. Again, darkness on one side. The top of that is pride. If you get to pride, it's going to bring you right back down. You just got to admit to yourself that you're broken, and you got to admit you're broken to everybody else, and you're seeking to be a better human, period. Again, this is not like a substance abuse thing. This is just like all things in life. I was broke at one point in my life. I was broke. Just straight up like $0. In fact, this is the funny thing about modern society. I was negative $600, in fact, and I had a line of credit that was just maxed. I was done. I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I had to admit that I was broken, and then I could start to finally make calls. Reached out to a coach. I can't pay you, but I need your help. Okay, now we can get somewhere. Right? Okay, so now we're on the crossing vulnerability. We get to courage. After courage, now we can start to feel optimism. Then we can start to feel enthusiasm. Then we can start to feel happiness. Then we can start to feel joy. Then we can start to feel pure bliss, right? So it goes up the scale. But the first thing, and this is the most important thing, that you cross the bridge from the negative, the darkness, right? That negative state of emotion, and you cross through vulnerability. That's the bridge. You have to be vulnerable. It's hard. It's super hard. But I promise you. Okay, So here's one of the major pitfalls that people do is that they still have pride, and then they think that they're trying to not feel the feelings. That's the biggest pitfall here. Not feeling the feelings. You have to feel all the feels. All the feels. The good and the bad. You got to take the bad. You got to feel all the feels. You got to sit. That's why meditation is super important. Observation. Just sit in it. Don't run away from it. Witness it. Sit in it. In fact, if you go down into it, then you can come back up. And we'll talk about the exact how in the academy. But we'll talk about the practices. But here's the biggest pitfall. The biggest pitfall that people have to keep them low is that they use pride that stops them, and ultimately they try to numb the pain. Again, negative emotion, we experience negative emotion the same way we experience negative pain. So what do they numb the pain with? They numb the pain with antidepressants, thinking that that's going to bring them up. It's not. The antidepressants are not going to be the savior here. So if you're on antidepressants right now, talk to your doctor. I'm not your doctor, but you need to talk to that person. You need to start looking at changing this part over here. You need to start moving forward. Put the alcohol down, put the drugs down, put the TV down, put the food down for a second. Feel the feels. Feel the negative. Get over your pride, vulnerability, step forward, admit that you're broken. Use vulnerability to ask questions, to go forward. Again, that's just the emotional side. There's tons of other parts that we've done here. We live here. This is where everybody gets really iffy about the world. But you're not even your state of emotion. That's what we talked about in step number 1 here. You're not the emotion that you're experiencing. That's just the basis upon which you experience. But you're not the emotion. That's the thing. You get to control the emotion through the statement and the meaning you put to it, but you're not the emotion itself. And the reason we delve into the emotional state right now is so that you understand, whoa, this is what it's going to look like. This is what the journey is going to experience, how you're going to experience along the journey. If you get to pride and you stop yourself, now you're dead in the water. You're going to go right back to hopeless. You do that enough times, that's it. Game over. That's where people get suicidal. Okay? So just know you're not alone. You're not isolated. You can reach out. You got to put your pride aside. You got to be vulnerable. Admit that you're broken. You don't know what to do. It's okay. I've been there. I'll raise both my hands. I've been there. Go to courage. And then the next morning, go to courage. And then the next morning, go to courage. You're going to be okay. I promise you this. Okay, so what to do with the emotion? Know what the scale is. Get rid of the pride. Go forward across the bridge of vulnerability to courage. And then you can start taking correct actions. Okay? There's a ton more things that you can do. We're going to dive into some practices that you can step away from the negative emotion, how to process things like anger and jealousy and rage and all these things, how to process the emotion itself, specifically each one, or if you're in a situation where you're having a bit of a panic attack, how to work with that. There's a bunch of stuff that we can work here, a bunch of practices that we can work here. But I need you to know that. I need you to know that the emotion is where we experience the world, but you are not the emotion. And so that's super important. So again, as you're walking forward, know what the pitfall is. The pitfall is not feeling all the feels. Put the substances down. You're not helping anybody by not feeling. Again, if you want to know how to feel these things, that's in the academy. Go into the academy so you can at least hold some space. Again, it's the emotion of the thing that it's so tense. We feel so much pain, so much anger. We don't know how to process it. So I show you how to do that in a healthy way in the academy. But the point of this lesson is that I want you to, when you get to pride, you put your pride aside, you go across the bridge of vulnerability to get to courage. That's what having faith is. That's the whole idea of faith. Okay. Now, in the next part, we're going to talk about reaction. We're going to talk about habits. We're going to talk about cues. All these things, all the research has come out about this. You probably read books like The Power of Habit, all these things. Atomic Habits. And so we're going to dive into that next. But for right now, I want you to know that the emotion is where we experience the world. It's what we really want. We want to feel better. We want better results. We think the result's going to give us that end result, or that feeling, but it's not. It's everything. You got to do it all. And you got to practice it all every day. And if you do, then you'll be unbreakable. I promise you this. Okay. Now, if you like this lesson, please share this. This is information I wish I had on my journey. You see how emotional this is for me even still, just thinking about it. Because when I was there and I was in pride, I would go right back to helpless. And this is my mission now, is to get this out to as many people as possible. So if you see that this can be of benefit to anybody, not just yourself, but anybody, somebody that you see as like even the same or even better place, whatever, give this to them. Give this lesson, because everybody needs to know this. Everybody needs to know this. And again, the emotion is just the way we experience the world. You got to do it all. You got to think, you got to feel, you got to act. Then you can get the result. Okay? But until that point, you're just going to be living in the suck. I was there. I'll raise my hand. I was there. I was in the suck for a long time. Okay? So now, if you like this information, if you want to dive into the Academy, if you're not part of the Academy, dive in, go to the description below, share this information with your friends, subscribe to the channel. You guys have been amazing. I love you all. Thank you so much for getting through this with me. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. I'll see you out there. Stay unbreakable, guys.